And I will say thank you to everyone who has joined us for the kickoff event for our virtual Women in MedTech series. I, for one, am incredibly excited to have all of you joining us. I was telling the group earlier, we had over 150 women register for this. It's such a great opportunity, and one of the reasons we wanted to do something like this was I miss all of you. I am definitely an extroverted person who is having some serious withdrawal from people. And I always enjoy our Women in MedTech meetings so much. It's one of the reasons I joined Mass Medic just a few months ago, was because I just felt so strongly that the community in Massachusetts was an incredible one to be a part of. And I wanted to contribute to that in a meaningful way. So I really firmly believe in the Women in MedTech program. And when we started chatting through how to get everyone together, we had planned to do an in-person event in May. We thought, okay, well, let's go virtual. Let's make it a series, and let's try to do something really positive with the series. So we brainstormed with a smaller group of our board members some topics that would be of interest and that might be really helpful for what we're all going through right now. Let's keep it real. It's kind of a tough situation we're all dealing with, and some tougher than others. And we can only begin to scratch the surface of understanding and having empathy for one another right now. So we thought, let's put together a series of 4 events that will hopefully feed back into the community a really positive understanding and experience, and share some war stories and survival tales of all different kinds about kind of just how we come together and how we get through tough situations with a really positive outlook, hopefully. So tonight is our first event of 4. If you haven't registered for the other 3, we'll be doing them in succession, 1 a week for the next 3 weeks. We do have some really excellent topics and speakers coming up after this. So if you have questions, it's all on our website, massmedic.com. You can email me at rachel@massmedic.com, shoot me a note in the chat, and would be happy to chat through that. But just first off, I wanted to say thank you. We are using this as a fundraising opportunity, as well as feeding back into the community. And with all of the donations that have come in just in the past 2 weeks, we have raised over $1,700 for our partner, New Hope, which is an excellent organization. And I'm going to introduce Marcia in just a minute to say hello from New Hope and tell you a little bit about what they're doing. It is an incredible association to be partnering with on this, and we are incredibly excited about the amount of money that's been raised. We are trying to get to a $5,000 goal, so please feel free to contribute what you can. This is not something where it is required, but it's been honestly so heartwarming to see $5 donations, $10 donations, right? Like, just see where you're at, and if you can give, please do. If not, put it out there in the world for someone else, right? Share the information with your community in case others can give as well. And then I would like to say thank you to our sponsors. We could not do any of our events without a group of sponsors who are just incredibly supportive and give us so much encouragement for what we do. And the Women in MedTech series is sponsored by Zymedica, Sunrise Labs, and the Mullings Group. We couldn't, like I said, do it without them. So just want to say a big shout out and a big thank you to them. And again, all of you that have contributed, thank you, thank you, thank you. This is such a great, exciting opportunity. I'm going to turn this over to Brian Johnson for one quick word, and then we'll have Marcia from New Hope give you a little bit of an introduction.
Great, thank you, Rachel, and just fabulous job. My heart is full to hear that we raised $1,700 thus far. I'm going to go ahead and donate $300 so we kick it up to $2,000 for tonight. So if anyone wants to join me in any other way, go ahead and just throw it in the chat. I want to thank Marie O'Malley, our steadfast chair, our board chair here at Mass Medic, for all of her leadership and support on this program. And I also want to thank the Holly Scott from Mullings Group and Amy Siegel and all the other folks, Meg Eckenrode, all the other great folks in our sort of our angels in our community that are helping us do this. I was just reading a report that said the work-life balance has been shattered. Bloomberg put out a story about it employers are getting almost 3 hours more productivity out of their workers per week, uh, which goes to show you that um, we are in a new reality, that the professional world is bleeding into our home life. We need to learn new ways to deal with the stress and anxiety um, that is surrounding us in a period of great uncertainty. It brings up a whole bunch of things. And, I can't help but think every day as I go through this swirl of emotions and my family goes through. I have 2 children at home not going to school. My wife is running a business and trying to help keep these kids educated, and we're all just kind of at our wits' end. And I also realize we're the lucky ones, and that's why we had to do something for New Hope, because um, when we looked broadly and realized that we were lucky in retrospect, sort of in the big picture, I think it was just such an important thing to do. And I want to thank Rachel for really for guiding us on that, and for the support of all of our incredible board members and our sponsors and everyone who contributed tonight. So I'm going to shut up and hand them the microphone back. But thank you all for coming, and thanks for your generosity.
Thanks, Brian. That's fantastic. Marcia, I'd love to have you introduce yourself and New Hope very quickly before we get into content. I think it would really help everyone to know the kinds of things that you guys are working through right now, and how every little bit helps.
Sure. So thank you all for allowing me to join with you. It's very exciting to be here. So I'm the executive director at New Hope. Actually, I want to just tell you a little bit of a story that I think will go along with your theme tonight. So in 1979, a woman named Edith Palmer noticed a trend. She noticed that a lot of her friends were talking about domestic violence, and that the fact that they were involved in a domestic violence situation. Now, Edith came of age in the 60s during the burgeoning feminist movement and civil rights movement and gay rights movement. And Edith was not one to sit around and just wait. She, like a lot of you who are entrepreneurs, she wanted to take action. So she marched herself down to the police station, a local police station, and she spoke with the chief. She said, look, these women need help. And she knew that the place that they generally called was the police station. So she said, this was the days before smartphones and social media and the internet. And she said, look, is there a way that you can route a call to people's homes? And he said, yes, we can do that. And she said, if I get a group of volunteers to answer the phone, would you be willing to do that? Well, yes, he would love to do that, because frankly, the police do not like to respond to domestic violence calls. They were not crazy about it. So this was a win-win. So the police would be able to get some assistance in handling these calls, and Edith could really make a difference in the lives of women. So that really was the humble beginnings of New Hope. From that point, when this system was operationalized, that first year, 1979, Edith and her volunteers answered over 500 calls that first year of domestic violence. And that was really the genesis of New Hope. That was really the thought of someone who saw a need, had an idea. A lot of people told her she was crazy at the time. What do you mean you're going to have these calls routed to your home? I mean, that was like technology no one could imagine. But she knew there was a need, and she took an action. And from that, created New Hope. The next year, she said, oh, look, these women need some place to go. Let's start a shelter. So 1980, New Hope opened a shelter. We now have 2 shelters. And from that humble beginnings, New Hope now works in 41 cities and towns in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. We have our 24/7 hotline is still operational. You still get a live person every time you call. We now have 2 domestic violence shelters that takes in anyone who's a victim of violence. Used to be battered women, now it's anyone, women, men, anyone who's a victim of violence. And we're still working with the police. We have advocates in 12 police stations that follow up on every call the police respond to get the victim support, to help them with safety planning, connect them to other resources. We have counselors that provide counseling in 5 offices around the Commonwealth, providing free counseling to anyone, all master's level, licensed therapists. We have advocates who work with the courts to help people with restraining orders, protection orders. We have advocates that do medical response if a sexual assault victim shows up at an emergency room in local hospitals. And then we have housing advocates. We work with people who have supervised visitation to try to help people who are not living with their kids because of domestic violence and helping them to build a nurturing relationship with their children. We have specialized child therapists that work with children who witness violence. And then we have a whole prevention and education program. So as Brian mentioned, I think these times have created a whole new way of working for us. And what we've had to do is basically become remote. So like you all, we're using a lot of Zoom, we're using HIPAA compliant platforms to help provide counseling. We're still providing counseling to folks. And as you can imagine, the stress level these days is incredibly high, because if you have to stay at home and you're in a domestic violence situation, you're basically locked away with your abuser 24/7. So at first, we had a decrease in calls, we had a decrease in people reaching out, but people are starting to reach out now, and we are just seeing people who are incredibly stressed, high levels of trauma, of anxiety, panic attacks. And so we're doing everything we can to really just support people. And I started with this little story about New Hope because I know that all of you are entrepreneurs and working in a field where, you know, you see a need, you're trying to create things new and exciting and different. And I think that it's important to remember that an idea can blossom in ways that you never imagined. So that's a little bit about New Hope. I'm going to stop there just to say that I'm really honored to be here with all of you. I'm really humbled by your generosity, and I look forward to hearing a little bit more from the other speakers. So thank you.
Thank you. That's such a great introduction, Marcia, and we really do appreciate all that you all are doing. So keep up the tremendous work, and thank you for letting us partner with you. It's an honor to be doing that.
My pleasure.
So I am incredibly excited to introduce our two speakers for the evening. I initially reached out to Maureen online because we started thinking about this. I'm like, I want inspirational women. I want to learn from inspirational women. I'm just going to start reaching out to people on LinkedIn who I think have an incredibly cool profile, and I'm going to ask them if they'd be willing to share their story with me. And Maureen was one of the first people I actually reached out to because I saw her profile and I thought, well, okay, I love talking to people who work with money. I think venture capital, angel investing is one of the more interesting things for me personally to learn about because I know very little. And I found that she was working with Amy, and they had co-founded two females co-founding a venture capital firm, which again, to me was somewhat shocking and incredibly interesting. So I reached out, and as I learned a little bit more about Amy and Maureen and chatted with them, I thought they would be such a great opportunity to share with you a little bit about what they've been doing, their story, and hopefully inspire a conversation around what it's like to take a chance, what it's like to bet on yourself and to say, this is what I want to do. And there's going to be challenges. It's not going to be easy. It's not always going to be fun. And sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes you're going to fall down and there's going to be an opportunity to pick yourself up and do it all over again. So I really would love to have that conversation. As just a couple of housekeeping, keep yourself on mute to avoid background noise, but we do love conversations and we would love questions. So if you would like to be a part of the conversation, feel free to use the chat bot to enter questions, or there is a raise your hand option. If I see a hand go up, I'll try to pause Amy and Maureen to get your questions out there, and you can ask your questions in live time. So I'd say let's make this as conversational as possible. But I would love to start with Maureen and Amy. Either one of you can chime in with this. What was the foundation for Good Growth Capital? Tell everyone a little bit about yourselves and what inspired you to do this.
Sure, I'll start. So Amy and I met 20 plus years ago. After I finished my MBA and PhD at MIT, I went to Bain & Company, and I was asked to recruit her to Bain & Company because she was also MIT MBA and doing her PhD. So there wasn't a lot of us. we realized that we both much prefer working for startups and with startups than working with the big Fortune 500s. So we said, someday we'll start that company. And one day I got a call from Amy. She said, as she went back and tried to get research for her PhD in technology transfer, why do some technologies languish in the labs and why do some things make successful exits? She started working with companies. And she said, I got a call, hey, Maureen, I think I started that company we talked about. So that was Ignition Ventures. And what we did for 10, 15 years was we worked with technical founders and we co-founded the companies. So Amy would be the acting CEO and I would be the acting COO. I would work on strategy. I used my background at Bain & Company. And so that was Ignition Ventures. We took some time off to have children. Well, I wouldn't say time off. I would say we slowed down our career for a while. And people asked us before we did that, why don't you raise a fund? Why don't you actually raise money so you can invest in women? And we said, we would love to, but we want to be able to look investors in the eye and say, we're going to take care of your money. And that's the most important thing we're going to do for the next 10 years of life of the fund. So when luckily we both had our children at the same time, and when they were all in school, unfortunately they're not now, they were homeschooled, right? But when they were all in school, we got back together and said, is this the time? And this is the time. And we started Good Growth Capital. So we're investing in tech companies, early stage, seed, Series A. We have health tech as 40% of our portfolio, green tech and advanced materials is about 30%, and a lot of data sciences is overlap.
Can I
I'll just add a little to what Maureen.
I love that. I think I just founded a company. Like that's kind of hilarious. Like I think I just started that company. That might be my new favorite line. I think I just started that company we talked about. No big deal. It's fine.
Well, I'll just add a little bit of color to what Maureen was saying. I think if you look at us, we're a classic CEO, COO pair, and we're stronger together, and we know that. What's most unusual about us in that, because that's something that people see in business on a pretty regular basis, is women CEO, COO pair, especially starting in the early 2000s, right? So, we would joke, and a journalist would call and say, do you want to be on the cover of this magazine? And I would call Helen Greiner from My Robot and say, Helen, you doing any PR? One of us has to do this thing, right? So it was very unusual. I think, now when we were starting the fund, we fully support the funds that primarily invest in women entrepreneurs or invest only in women entrepreneurs. But for Maureen and I, we felt like we wanted to show that we had moved past that, that we could just say, we are going to invest for the highest possible return. Now, that being said, we are majority women-owned fund. There's a third woman partner. A lot of our venture partners and advisors are women. 48% of the women in our first fund, or of the CEO founders, are women. They're not given any preference or priority. It's just that I think we listen to them in a different way. They feel comfortable talking to us. When I was a CEO, it was if you asked venture capitalists and academic researchers to describe a bankable CEO, and probably some of you still have this issue, they would describe all the tenets of an alpha male. So I think, we feel like it's an advantage to be able to see past that alpha male stereotype in the people who are really starting companies that create a huge amount of value. And by the way, that fund with the 48% women CEOs has over 40% net IRR. That's huge for a fund, right? That's a top performing fund, and the women are leading it. So
that is really impressive. So this is just a question. Can you identify what you think some of those traits are that make women really great to work with and start venture opportunities, right? If we were giving women tips and saying, hey, these are the strengths that we've seen, make sure that you're playing to your strengths, but these are some of the things that we've seen that work really well. Any thoughts on that?
I'll give a start on that one. You know the saying, Ginger Roberts did everything that Fred Astaire did, but backwards and in heels. It's so true. Like by the time a woman goes out for funding, she is so sure of her business. It is, you know, it's really rock solid, I would say. I would encourage people to jump in earlier. Don't wait to be perfect because, you know, perfection, what is it saying? Perfection is the enemy of good enough. So go earlier and look for advisors. You've built a career, you have your knowledge, you've built people around you who can help you, and use them to network and to advance your career. So don't wait to be perfect, but usually great.
I mean, I would say one of the things that we often see with women entrepreneurs is they're afraid to ask for enough money. So they'll start off with a smaller plan in what they're doing. That happened with a team that Maureen was mentoring, and they were thinking to just go, oh, it happens all the time. You know, they were thinking to just look at one therapeutic target because they didn't think they could raise the money. You could raise the money, right? Once you have a good investment, you can raise the money. I mean, the other thing I think is that when I first was running a venture-backed company, you know, and raising money for that, I can remember people saying, we had a really strong board. We had some famous men on the board. And somebody said to me, you know, good for you, Amy, you're swinging your bat with the big boys. And then a friend challenged me on that. Was that what I really wanted to do? That's, you know, you're hearing me, that's not my style at all. So I think to think about, and it could be yours, right? You could be a woman whose style is very alpha male, but to find an authentic leadership style that works for you. And I think there are also some negotiation stances that work better for women than they do for men. One of them is, for example, we were doing a next to impossible licensing negotiation. Nobody had licensed anything from this place in 10 years. And the licensing officer would honestly be kind of personally insulting. So the male who was my partner in that negotiations, at some point I've just got to put him up against the wall by the neck. And as a woman, you can take a kind of mothering stance or a professorial stance and basically say, you know, you're acting out. This clearly is upsetting to you. So how can we move past this? I see a lot of the women are laughing, right? Because it does work. So I think, you know, there's a lot of literature and negotiation analysis about how to play to those strengths that are traditionally feminine.
I appreciate that you said that. I think what resonates to me too, especially what you just said, is the playing to your strengths and the being authentic, right? I think we, as someone who's seen a lot of startups and a lot of pitches and just talk to a lot of people, as you get to know them a little bit better, you get to see the authenticity that sometimes people don't feel like is a strength in a presentation or in a pitch or in a venture competition. They feel like they need to present a face that is a certain way. But once you get past that, if you can learn to play to, like I said, what your strengths are, I think that's a really interesting, it's an interesting realization. It's something that strikes out with me. How has your experience been with men pitching to you? How has that gone?
It certainly works. Well, we have 2 men out of the 5 that are managing partners. So, I mean, we probably all worked with men all of our lives, right? I was a civil engineer undergrad. I went to MIT. I was the only woman in the room so many times, I can't tell you. So it's not an issue. It's really not for me. Amy, do you have a different perspective?
There's one pitch that does stand out. An app developer. So our third woman partner at our fund is named Carolyn LaSala. And among the things that Carolyn has done is she was one of the founding team that launched the iTunes Music Store. She launched and led iTunes Europe, and then she launched and led the App Store. Now, the person who was pitching clearly had bothered to look up the background of the man that was going to be there from our fund, but never looked up Carolyn's. So we were really listening to this pitch as a favor to the local medical university. And Carolyn was kindly trying to explain to him a strategy for how to work with the App Store. And he decided to explain to Carolyn how the App Store worked. So, sometimes those things happen either explicitly or implicitly. I think, right now we're out raising our third fund. And I told you, like, our first funds have outperformed. They're phenomenal. That's all great. I also told you that the first fund had 48% women CEOs. We have a huge amount of deal flow, and you can hear that when we're pitching investors. So I was really surprised when an LP on the West Coast, so an LP is somebody who's going to invest potentially in a venture capital fund, said to me, do you feel like you're seeing the best male-led deals since you're a majority women-owned fund? And I was flabbergasted. I just told him we'd seen, thousands and thousands of deals. And just because these women had outperformed. Now, a good friend of mine, Astro Teller, who runs X for Google, that night I was having dinner with Astro, and he came up with the best response, and I did not have that response at the time. I assure you, I was not clever enough to come back with this comeback. And he said that I should have said that we would be happy to create a little sidecar fund that would be a male opportunity fund, wouldn't have the highest possible return, that we would differentially, give preference to white male CEOs, because that's what was really on their mind. So, I think sometimes, a lot of times women are still facing that explicitly or implicitly.
If you don't mind me asking, so I know, Amy, you're in Charleston, right? So you're in a different part of the country than Maureen. How do you see the deal opportunities compare with things that are local to Massachusetts on the East Coast versus South Carolina?
I'll start. Because I'm at MIT quite a bit, I see a lot of early stage things. And lucky that Cambridge and Boston in general is really becoming the biotech center of the universe. So we do see a lot of that, which is wonderful. But we see early stage and deep tech, some things that might take a longer time, kind of patient capital is needed. Although we always look for an early exit so we can have a fund. And Amy, I think in Charleston, it's more well-rounded, and it's not just South Carolina, but it's Research Triangle. So we do see a lot of tech there. But Amy, why don't you speak to Carolinas?
Yeah, I think, and actually Kathy Flieger is on the phone here, or on the video I see, also from here in South Carolina, a real expert in med devices and commercialization, so she could answer if she would like to. We think of these deals as kind of different. They're very well priced, and coming in at 1 or 2 million and out at $30 or $60 million is a great deal for South Carolina. It's also a great way to invest, as long as you're not investing a giant fund. So we see a lot of things that no other fund has looked at. We also, and I think Kathy could especially speak to this, we need to put a lot more work in. They don't have an entrepreneurial ecosystem that surrounds them in kind of the same way, where you could just go to the MassMedic meeting and you'll be able to ask 15 very experienced entrepreneurs for their advice. I'll have things happen like a professor from the University of South Carolina who has a fantastic embolization technology. It is just superior. And when he asks me if I can invest in his company, as the answer I start off with, did you actually incorporate? No. Do I need to? A little different.
Yeah, a little different. That's definitely one. Okay, we have a question coming in from the chat bot. So actually from two different people. So after graduating with life sciences degree or PhD, what would you recommend for getting a job or experience in the startup arena and possibly venture capital? So any thoughts on the kind of pathway for that?
I'll start there. I see a lot of folks going to the general consulting firms, so the McKinsey, the Bain and Company, the BCGs, whichever, and then back to business school, unfortunately, and then pivoting. And someone with a deep medical health tech background they can often be hired as a specialist in a VC fund.
I think it's true. I don't know that it's, I think that business school can be great for people. Also venture capital funds, they need to do due diligence, right? Our team has a pretty deep bench of people who are very technically specialized, and to offer to work on diligence in an area that you really know a lot about. As an intern, we at Ignition Ventures, we had a lot of interns. We take many fewer for the fund, but I think that's a good way to go. We've had also, professors and people who come on as an advisor or venture partner, and they're not all funds work this way, but we're very transparent in the way we run the fund. So they're on our Thursday deal call, every week, hearing how the partners are looking at things. There's a separate biomedical deal call, which is amazing. And I think even if we're not investing in a CEO, we have some people on that deal call. Catherine Moore, one of the founders of Intuitive Surgical, who now runs the Intuitive Surgical Foundation. Larry Olenoff, who was the CEO of Celsion and ran Senior Vice President for Clinical Development of Upjohn, and Sandoz was at Forest, COO of Forest Labs. They're hearing how they are thinking about an invention, not just as for its scientific merit, but for its commercialization pathway. You learn so much.
Interesting.
And I just wanted to add to that. I do think the other thing is either, offer to be an advisor or have an internship, or look for the VCs that are investing in areas that you have a specialty in, because they will need to do due diligence. So if you have a particular expertise in a certain medical area, look for those kind of VCs who are investing in, and either apply or offer to do some due diligence, and then can work into a position.
There also are, newsletters for venture capital that say what's been funded. And that's a good way if you're looking for a startup job. Somebody just got $8 million, they're probably about to hire.
It's always a good indication. Any thoughts on, the current climate of investment, right? There's a lot of craziness and a lot of upending of ventures right now. So any thoughts or any opportunities that you've seen from a technology standpoint that you think would be good to get into, other than, some of the current stuff?
Boy, am I glad I'm not investing in brands. I'll tell you, luxury goods, not the moment. But we're talking for MassMedic. I think people really do think we're seeing that the LPs are thinking, oh wait, health tech, that's actually really useful. So I think one investment criteria we've had always in these funds, because we're old and we remember 2001 and 2008, is that the companies that we're investing in need to be able to exit well, no matter what market they mature in. It actually does bound the kinds of companies that we invest in to a certain extent, because they need to exit within 4 to 7 years, and they need to be able to successfully exit without it being an IPO, which, if you think about that creates a kind of a ceiling on the allowable costs for development. And yet we invest in transformative science. I think that we feel like we need to be very proactive in reaching out to our companies. I think if I were either a CEO at a startup right now or working at a startup, I would want to understand the runway of the financial runway, how much money your company really has and how long it can last. And then also the financial runway of the backers, right? In 2001, in 2008, there were a lot of great companies that went under. The company itself was sound, but the leading financial people went under. SoftBank was, SoftBank going under at one point, killed a lot of companies. And we see that with our co-investors. I know I kind of laughed about luxury brands, but we've got a co-investor that is going to have a lot of stuff like that on their books. They're not going to be able to raise money, or they might feel like they need to prop up those kinds of companies for a while.
The good news, and I'll just add there, the good news is that if you look back at 2008, it is the early stage companies that did the best, and it is the health tech companies that did the best. So early stage companies are more nimble. You can pivot. You typically don't depend on big supply chains. Typically, you can work from home unless it's, sometimes there's lab work. But actually, one of our companies that's doing lab work, they were able to buy some of the equipment and do the work out of the garage. So you see more, the companies are far more nimble in the early stage. And then, the health tech, we really believe it's not going to slow down. And it's not just health tech, but the other reason we invest in the green tech is because we believe that keeping the environment clean will make for fewer diseases, right? I mean, we'll all be healthier if the environment's healthier. So kind of the two go hand in hand there.
All right, we got a ton of questions coming in from the chat bot. If you guys don't mind, we'll pepper you with those. So Holly Scott was asking, how often do you guys work with software and data in your companies that you invest in, and how do you stay close to the trends for these applications, understanding how viable they actually are?
Should I answer that? I think Maureen and I were really very thoughtful about what kind of fund we wanted to have. And we felt that over time, you see that disciplines, some very complex disciplines, the leading edge of them is actually interdisciplinary. So that we wanted our fund to be able to do that. So I'm one of the leaders of our biomedical deal team, but a lot of times the biomedical deal team really needs the data sciences deal team to understand a deal. And we all work together. Actually, the way we've structured the fund, some funds are structured so that a partner gets more carry, so they get more of the profit sharing of the fund, depending on how many deals they bring in, whether that deal was particularly profitable. We'd raised tens of millions of dollars. We dealt with a lot of venture funds, and we saw that creates tension in the partnership. You could feel people kind of arguing who brought in, this particular deal. So we didn't do that. Everybody on our team already has their compensation and their carry, and we all work together, and we're all incented to do that. So there's all these different disciplines and different specialties on the team, and we need them all. So it's a good question. Yes, I think we see data most of the time at some point in the process.
Awesome. Okay.
I just answered Helena's question. Go for it. Don't wait. Don't wait to see a job posting. Contact them. Offer what you have.
Great. Thank you for that. That was a great one too. Danny was asking, he said, I'm like the guy with the embolism technique, but I have incorporated, but he's a scientist, not a business person, and frankly, no flair for business. So finding partners, Danny, I would say, depending on where you are, groups like MassMedic and other organizations just like us would love to know more about what you're doing and how we can try to help connect you with those partners. Amy, Maureen, do you all have an avenue internally where you see, hey, this is a really good technology, but this is not the right person? I have a Rolodex of people that I could potentially connect them with to be the CEO?
There are a lot of the accelerators, whether it's here in Mass Challenge, we have accelerators and they match people. And you're located in Massachusetts, Danny? Well, I would encourage you to reach out to some of the tech accelerators. There's so many people with business experience that would love to find great technologies to work on. And they have worked on them before, but they're not the technical person. So yes, you can certainly, yeah. So Mass Challenge is a great place. They actually have the medical one. There's Bostino. There's, look into the different accelerators and startup support systems, because there's so many, especially here in the Boston area.
And we will look at those kinds of companies, but that's not so typical for a venture capital fund. If you're going to look for venture capital, and there's lots of ways to fund a company, by the way, without taking venture capital, you want to look for a venture capital fund that says they'll invest pre-seed. which is few and far between.
Yeah. Okay, Marissa was asking, and this is a good one because I often get different opinions on this. Do you focus more on the idea or the founder? Obviously, both are important, but does one give you a little more pull than the other?
I mean, we're a deep tech fund, so we have the luxury of focusing a lot on the idea. If the founders understand that they, they might be just like the person who was just asking that question, that they really might not be able to run the company. If they're going to stay, and that's their intent is to run things, then we're focused as much on the founder as on the technology. Is that a fair way to say it, Maureen?
I would say, I mean, back in our Ignition Ventures day, there was a professor who came to us with this great technology, and you would think it was leading edge in underwater exploration. MIT professor, so you think, okay, knows, but the market wasn't there. Everyone in the market was losing money. So, it's not one over the other, it's many things in combination. So yes, the person has to either have the right skill set or have a team or be willing to build the team. The technology has to be there. The market has to be there. The market, the technology, typically we want it to be defendable or patentable in some way. So it's a combination. If you can certainly lose confidence in a team easily, and it might be a great idea, but if the team isn't there, then you could pass. But if the market isn't there, you pass, so it's really a combination. I won't say it can't be only one thing. It has to be all.
You can look online for the diligence questions that are typically asked by investors. And I think that's a great checklist for how to prepare yourself. We did raise tens of millions of dollars at Ignition Ventures. We never wrote business plans. People don't actually expect that. But they expect you to have done all the work that would go into a business plan. I also think that the very, very early stage startup is a lot about risk mitigation. So if you think about it, there's multiple different dimensions of risk. There's financial risk, right? That you won't be able to get funded or you'll run out of money. There's execution risk that your team won't be able to execute on the plan. There's market risk that there's a substitute or that the customers that you're going after actually, would never switch from their existing, supplier anyway, or, payers won't pay. There's technical risk that, so to our mind, starting companies and then analyzing companies, if one risk is really high, you better really tamp down all the other kinds of risks, right? So say if your technical risk is really high, then you want to surround that thing with the best team that's going to show if anybody can execute this thing, it's this team. And the market is so superior and so valuable that it's worth the financial risk. And the same thing, goes for all of those different sources of risk. If it's really going to be a huge investment and, big capital costs, all the other risks better be pretty low.
Great. That's a great answer. And I think you're absolutely right. And it's such a spot on thing, right? When it comes to anything, risk mitigation is key. It's how do you make it as appealing as possible? And you don't want to have multiple bombs that may go off. One bomb is enough to make people say no. So if you can de-risk everything else, then that's a bonus. What was your biggest challenge the first time you all raised a fund for Good Growth Capital?
I think the biggest challenge is that it was a first time fund. And everybody says they're not interested in a first time fund.
And then women, right?
And then women, that's exactly right.
And you got a comment once, well, I don't take financial advice from a woman. you know?
I mean, I was the person who said it out loud, and I was thinking, like, okay, we've started billions of dollars worth of businesses. We've got this great track record, and this is still based on my gender. Then it's just not happening.
So, how did you all overcome those challenges?
Because we're good. Actually, I I want to tell this story because it's about a woman founder in MedTech, Skyhawk Therapeutics. You know, I met her at one of these luncheons, and she had worked at the SMA Foundation. They sold their technology to Roche for $700 million in stages. She worked at Roche. She realized the technology was applicable to many other diseases. I meet her. I listen to her. She's, you know, if you look up Skyhawk Therapeutics, she's the CTO. She was the CEO at the time, but the CSO, I guess she is. Very attractive, blonde, 30-year-old. You know, people weren't listening to her. We listened to her. And the company now has $17 billion worth of contracts in 2 years. So you listen, you know, you listen to the people who are worth listening to. And you try not to I think I would say as women, we've been the underdog enough so that maybe we listen a little bit more, and I'm proud of that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that then what happened is that we had a 343% IRR. So then people had to listen to us. I think you can hear in listening to Maureen, I'm lucky I have the best partner in the world. And it's easier to do this together because you get a lot. She's the smartest person in any room. There might be other people who are equally smart, maybe, you know, in some technical way. So, you know, I have the confidence in me that if they've just said no to Maureen, well, she was still the smartest person in the room. And it is, you know, so if you could find good partners, I think that's a big part of the battle because, you know, we pitch all the time, right? Like now we're raising a bigger fund. It's $100 million fund with $150 million cap. That's still not such a big fund, but, you know, we'll do 3 pitches a day to big institutional investors. And at the end of the day, I'm looking at saying to Maureen, did we say that to that fund? Did we? Because you can't even remember. And when you're starting a company, it's the same way, right? I think things have gotten a little better. When we were starting companies, we didn't always take venture capital, but when we did, I mean, I certainly pitched more than 1,000 times, maybe more than 2,000 times, but definitely more than 1,000 times. And I never once pitched a woman partner. So it's better than now that, you know, it's still pathetic, but it's better than it was.
So find a good partner, find someone, you know, someone who can prop you up and support you and be there for you.
And we don't have the same skill sets. You know, we really, I think if funders start to be very good at, you know, basically hiring people. Board members often are good at this too. And so somebody who's pretty sophisticated about analyzing the strengths and weaknesses of a person are likely to see that if you put the 2 of these people together, Maureen and Amy, then you've got, wow, that's a pretty strong skill set. They're balancing each other. So you don't want a partner that's just like you. You want somebody who creates more depth to your offering.
Smart. Okay, one more question from the chat bot. Do you ever invest outside your typical verticals, and what kind of pushes you to do that, if you do?
We like to invest in areas where we can add value. So unless one of us or someone one of the managing partners or someone, a venture partner or one of the advisors on our team really has depth in the area, we want to make sure that we can bring value and we can help grow the company. So we really do like to stick to the industries, the areas that we're good at. And I guess that was the question, right? It was the outside of industrial and sectors, not geographical.
I think that's a really great point, and I hesitate to say this, but I think it's true. A lot of investors that I've talked to in the past haven't articulated that as well, and I think that is something that can make you so much more successful. So I'm really glad that you mentioned on that, right? So how do you add value? And I think we should all be looking for that, right? Especially when you're starting a company, right? How does the idea add value to the industry that I'm trying to place it into? How do the people that I'm working with add value to the company, and how do I add value to that relationship as well? So I think it's probably incredibly crucial to find investors that do add value to your company. Otherwise, you're going to be working with people who don't really understand what you're doing.
And they're tough.
Okay, one more question. I know you all had a pretty solid stop at 6, so I want to make sure I'm being respectful of your time. One more question from the audience was, what percentage of stake do you typically take in a company?
We don't think of it that way. Oh, you answer, Maureen.
Well, we always syndicate, so we don't. We'll never take the first round all by ourselves. We want to make sure that there's other people who can come and add value, other investors who can add value. We share the risk. So we don't think of it that way. We think of how much money does this company need to raise to hit the next big milestone, to have a next huge increase in their valuation, and then what kind of bite can we take, and who else is at the table. So.
Okay, last question, and then we'll close out. What questions do VCs not want to be asked? What are kind of like the hidden, ooh, this is not a good one. I really wish that hadn't been said.
I get very turned off when I see somebody tell me that it's $1 billion market. Because almost always that means you just haven't bothered to do your market segmentation. And I don't need to see $1 billion market. I need to see a realistic analysis. So I see I see some other people. Brian is laughing when I said that. Yeah, don't do that.
Maureen, anything to add?
No, I'm thinking. I can't think of. No,
We're
I mean,
transparent. I mean, asking a question of us and what we do, bring it on. We like that. So.
Okay. Well, I have a whole other list of questions I could go through, but again, in the interest of time, I will say thank you so much for joining us for this first event, Amy, Maureen. Anything you'd like to share in closing before we
start that company?
Yeah, I think start the company, and if it's a good investment, investors will come. Don't be afraid to ask for the full amount of what you need. That's just, the classic women entrepreneur mistake. And I think that people really try to mentor people. I think assume goodwill, but guard against ill intent. So, the other thing I would say to that with scientific entrepreneurs, and Maureen and I both, we know that she jokes that I think every person is wonderful and every technology is terrible when we first meet them. And she does the opposite. But the critical thing there is that we have seen scientists, what happens is they end up drawn in by the slickest CEO type, the worst one, because they're the one that's willing to be the sort of the most dishonest, frankly. So in hiring, it usually takes one to know one. And I think, there are plenty of people, especially if you're in Massachusetts, that you can reach out to and say, I'm trying to start this company. Can you help me interview this person? Because that's not my experience skill set. And that can really make a big difference.
I want to add one more thing. You will get a lot of no's, and don't let that get you down.
Yes.
Do not let it get down. Like Amy said, she probably pitched probably three different companies. That there's probably 1,000 of those pitches. Yes, you will have to keep going. People won't love you the first time. They'll have to meet you over and over again. Sometimes it's a great company, but not a great match. Don't take it personally. Just keep going.
We were in California. She's right. I mean, we started a company called Ember Corporation. The technical co-founder, Rob Poor, and I were in California, and Rob started saying the pitch backwards because he could, because we'd done it so much. But the company was funded, right? Polaris was the lead and all went forward, but just gotta keep pushing.
Thank you both so much. And Marcia, thank you for joining us and telling us about New Hope. Everyone, I really hope that you got as much out of this as we did. We are going to make the video for this presentation available, so you'll be getting a copy of it in your email. And if you have any other questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. And we'd love to help connect you with anyone that could be helpful for you. So please join us for our next 3 events. You can find all the information on our website. And Amy, Maureen, thank you. You guys, your ladies are awesome. This was, I have so many thoughts and questions that I could spend hours on. So thank you for inspiring a lot of great conversation.
Thank you, everyone, and good luck with your startups.
Thank you. We want to hear all about them.
All right.
Bye.
Everyone, have a great night.
Good night.
Bye.
Thank you.
Good night.